an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering One Piece, episodes 595 through 597. Capture M, the Pirate Alliance's operation launches. On the verge of annihilation, a deadly monster comes flying in, and an intense battle. Caesar exercises his true power. In these episodes, got a lot of things here going on that I don't really know what to make of, and I'm really interested, in this power that Caesar Clown has, since it does seem to have effects on Luffy, but how does any of this work? Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Bernadette for commissioning this episode. I haven't seen Bernadette in the chat in ages. Girl, I hope that you are okay. I have seen you in the Discord, so I think you probably are. Also, Gabby. I have not seen Gabby in ages, and I haven't seen Gabby in the Discord, so I am also worried about you, Gabby. Hopefully you're all right. Y'all, this section was very fun as well. I'm really enjoying this arc so far. I feel like, last episode was a real banger, and we got another few bangers today. And we do, of course, it's unavoidable, have some repetition, things being drawn out, yada yada, but at least it's being drawn out when it's something that I don't feel like I have already understood. When I say that, what I'm thinking of is at the end when Luffy is finally affected, apparently, by Caesar Clown's poison gas power, like what he himself turns into. It's unclear to me at first that that's what's happening, and then as it affects Luffy, I was like, is it something that only affects Luffy? And then it clearly affects everybody, and so it was drawn out, but there was new information being given to me every step of the way. So it didn't feel that way. It was informative. So, okay, let's start at the beginning, shall we? The Pirate Alliance's operation launches. This is so funny because, technically, yes, but it doesn't feel as much like an alliance when one of the, groups in the alliance is really pissed that the other just gave their shit away. This is the sort of thing where it's again, Law didn't know what he was getting into with a alliance with Luffy. He really didn't. He's throwing in with somebody who is tough, who I think he maybe even respects a little bit, but he just didn't know the way that Luffy's priorities work, obviously, because the way he reacts to this, as if Luffy wasn't going to immediately go straight to this person's fucking front door and tell them precisely what the plan is. Of course he is. It's so predictable, honestly, if you know him at all. Robin, though, she's even like, dude, this was supposed to be kind of chill and a bit more discreet, did you? So she also has kind of forgotten who Luffy is, if we're being honest. So anyway, this episode, it's we have, again, you guys, I keep forgetting that it's Sanji in Nami's body. So there was a point where they're talking and I was sort of like, wait, who was that? And then I remembered, because I was thinking at first that the person who calls Brook mature was Zoro. But Zoro so rarely gives compliments that I was still a little wait, because I wasn't looking at the screen for that moment. And when I looked up and was like, oh wow, a compliment from Zoro, because Nami's the only other person there, and it wasn't her voice. And then again, Zoro speaks, but this time he's insulting Brook. And then it all came together again. And I was just like, oh, right. That's not even fucking Nami right now. I will say, though, Sanji is over here being simultaneously, like, really careful with her body in this. I know that she's probably more delicate than me, and I don't want to leave a scratch on her, but also is, like, pulling out a cigarette and just, like, pouring pollution into her lungs. And it would be something that felt a little bit like there was a conflict there, if not for the fact that we have always said it was only about our appearance, not our health, right? So as long as Nami stays looking good on the outside, without bruises and scratches on her that he would find unsightly, even if her body is decaying from the inside from cancer, well, can't help everything. So anyway, I'm trying to see what it is that he actually compliments. Here it is. Zoro says, I don't believe in the Yeti. And Sanji says, I do. And Brook says, I don't believe or disbelieve. I am content to simply ponder its existence. And that's when Sanji says that's a mature outlook. And then Zoro says, sorry, but I call that way of thinking indecisiveness, not wisdom. Which, it makes sense that he would think that. Zoro is not a subtle man with a nuanced view of the world. Like, let's be real. Eventually, though, they do stumble across the prints from the Yeti brothers, and they have to come to terms with the fact that the Yetis are real, that there's 2 of them, and the brothers come at them, again, these guns that I keep thinking are so fun. Like, they just feel out of proportion to everything. It's just wild. And what the Yeti do, it was sort of weird, actually, considering that there had just been, in the last episode, them saying, like, yeah, of course they're dead. If you didn't want them to be dead, then you should have sent different people to do the job. But it's, they don't really go for the kill on this one the way that they made it sound like in the last one. So they're standing there contemplating this huge footprint, and then one of the Yeti, actually no, both of them fire, and they send this, like, canister of gas that's this green cloud around them to disorient all of them. They are stumbling and almost, like, ready to pass out, and Brook describes it as feeling like he's drunk. So one of the brothers says, yeah, this leaves you drunk and drowsy no matter how high your tolerance. Beneath this cliff lies District F-16, home to the terrible ice spikes. And we get to see this thing underneath the edge of the cliff that is basically like, it couldn't have been purposely made by man's hand to be more lethal. So what they do is they shoot, the brothers shoot off the edge of the cliff so that the whole piece of the cliff plus all 3 of them just go hurtling toward the ground. Which, like I said, it feels like a bizarrely indirect way of handling things. You just shot a man. You shot Brownbeard dead. So it seems, for now anyway. Why wouldn't you just shoot these guys? But the answer is because that would be, then we would have dead protagonists, and we can't have that. So they go off of the cliff, but then Zoro sees that, like, huge thing below them with all of the spikes on it, and he slices that in half as well, so that they go down past it. And the brothers eventually come up to the edge to look down and see if all of them are down there. And it's like they see the spikes, but they can't tell that it's actually been cut in half. They also don't see the straw hats impaled on there anywhere, but nevertheless, evidently assume that it all went to plan, which is just not a good policy, frankly. But yeah, so they like call back to home base and say, yeah, they went off the cliff. We took care of it, but you guys are going to have to come and recover the bodies. So then we have all of these dudes coming to retrieve the bodies, and Nami, Sanji getting up and just like kicking the ever-loving shit out of them and waking up his friends and being like, all right, let's fucking do this, guys. Wake up. We cut from there to the oh my god, I forgot about Enough Hunting Natures and Mysteries. I think the samurai is around here somewhere. I'm sorry, I thought that scene ended and then we jumped to the other side, but no, there's still this conversation here about saving the samurai, and Sanji is like repeatedly in this trio of episodes like, I'm going to help him. I'm going to do the right thing, but I'm also going to beat the shit out of him once he's like put back together again. And he says this to them. He says it to the samurai a couple times. And so eventually they come to this frozen lake, and they are walking across it looking for the samurai, but stepping directly on his face as they're doing it. And eventually Zoro is the one who notices, which is genuinely kind of funny because Zoro is so unaware of his surroundings, which is, I think, why he gets lost all of the time so much that I wouldn't have expected him to be the one to see. But yeah, Sanji smashes this guy in the head so that the ice cracks off of him. It's like a coating, and he was just alive in there like a shell. And this dude is like, I suddenly became paralyzed. I thought for certain that death was upon me. And Sanji's like, dude, you suddenly became paralyzed? You almost froze to death. That's what you're talking about. And he tries to pretend that's not it at all, that like he isn't affected by the cold. Sir, why do you feel the need to do this? Instantly start shivering afterward. Oh, you idiot. So they ask him, like, where are your other parts? And he says, I do not acquire. Oh, right. Because Sanji tells him, like, maybe you should put some new clothing on yourself. And he says that the power comes with a cost, which I thought was sort of weird. Like, it just felt almost like I would have thought he was lying if it weren't spelled out for us a little bit more. I did not acquire it without a cost. Because of it, I now have a certain weakness. Ever since partaking of that fruit when submerged in water, and I was like, oh, that's it? I really thought there was going to be more to that. And it's a good thing that, like, his head was only a little off the shore. His body being sunk apparently isn't going to have as much of an effect. But he tells them that he thinks he knows where his torso is. You might locate it somewhere underwater. And Sanji is like, oh, shit. Because he is the one who knows how to swim. And even though he is in Nami's body, he's going to have to go ahead and swim down there. Which I cannot advise this at all. It is so... You guys... Ice cold water, it's terrifying how the kind of effect that it can have on you and how fast it happens. Like, oh god, this just, my whole body felt like it contracted. And also, I thought that it was interesting, the idea, because we've already like sort of seen this with other characters, and we see more of it later with Tashigi and Smoker. But Tashigi is like using Smoker's ability, but not really well. Like, she doesn't understand how to turn back into her body at one point. And Smoker is just like, will you get the fuck out of the way? You're ruining everything. But the fact that Sanji is going to be able to swim in Nami's body, I don't have a problem with this, because any body can swim. So even if she doesn't know how, if he has the knowledge, he can make her body move the way that it needs to in order to swim. However, I was kind of thinking about, there's another show that I'm covering called Altered Carbon. I've only covered the first 2 episodes, very compelling. And this character is put into a new body. He has the same memories and personality and everything, but he is put into a body that was specifically chosen because it has the muscle memory of martial arts already. And I thought that was really interesting. The idea that, like, you may know how to do martial arts, and so you may be able to technically get this body to move the way that it needs to perform certain movements, but that muscle memory is a different thing than knowledge. So perhaps even with your own understanding in your consciousness being installed into a new body, if that body isn't adequate, like with its reflexes and whatnot, you are not going to be nearly as effective a fighter. And that's setting aside like having the knowledge, but maybe the muscle density on this body isn't as great or whatever. It just sort of got me thinking about that. Like the changing of personalities to different bodies, it just raises a lot of questions, and the way that different properties handle that, I just always find a little interesting, because, you know, there's plenty of ways that you could follow this thread and make it so that there are significant obstacles, or you could make it so that there are a couple, but it's not too bad. But anyway, so I do like that eventually this wraps up with him saying thank you to Sanji, and Sanji saying, oh, look, you finally are saying thank you. Maybe everybody should get frozen. I thought that was funny. So they're coming up towards the side of the island that all of these centaurs are running away from. And the centaurs, I had thought for a moment was going to be like them attacking, but really quickly you see they are running from the thing. And our friends sort of stop and are just like, well, wait, what is it that they're running from? And then Zoro, once again, the guy that isn't normally very aware of his surroundings, is like, hey, guys, there's supposed to be a lake this way, right? So why is there a mountain? Where did that come from? And the camera pulls back and we see that like red and purple thing together, which we know is Smiley. And it's sort of bizarre because like I see it and it's first of all much larger than I was imagining in my head. But then eventually it begins to sort of break apart. And that was the part where I was like, what is going on? So we jump to Caesar Clown's lab and he explains that Smiley was the chemical weapon that was like what he allegedly saved the island from. Everybody thought that he had just found a way to purify the air. But instead, what he did was condensed the gas down into a, I guess, like, really, I was going to say liquid, but, like, when we saw him drop that tablet, it was not even a liquid. It was a solid. So he managed to basically, like, separate the gas from the rest of the atmosphere and just create this absolutely bonkers weapon with it, which that feels unfair but true. This feels like a thing that we would absolutely do, our own military. Why not? And he says, I had been developing a poison gas bomb, which I dubbed H2S. It was so deliciously effective that when it was unleashed on the island, it killed everything in its path within a matter of seconds. And apparently he hadn't intended this to be the way that this went down, which I did find kind of funny that he just sends this out there. And like the gas, when we see this flashback, it's not just people dying. It seems like the gas is so corrosive that we're even watching like buildings. Basically, it seems almost age so that they fall apart. It made me think of like the effects of acid rain. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, so the fact that he had not intended this, and he's like going around in his flashback, did they seriously think I would purify the entire island? And like, why would I be that wasteful? Instead, I created a monster by compressing all the gas, and it lives here still. My Smiley. Which, the fact that it's called Smiley, I do find very funny still. I do. I think that's great. So, also, guys, as he's, like, this is something that I really enjoy. When we have these monologues from him, and we have the flashbacks, and we see everything that happened, we forget temporarily, until the camera comes back to the present, that he is delivering this monologue right next to his assistant, Monet, who is utterly ignoring him. And I just keep finding that so funny. Just the fact that it's like written explicitly. Oh yeah, she's there. She's like right there. She can hear him. And she just doesn't even acknowledge him. And it doesn't feel at all like this is info he's telling her. He's 100% monologuing. She knows this already, is my impression. And I don't know why I think that, but I do. But yeah, he, is just really feeling himself, and the way that this whole thing, like, there's almost a sense that he can see the camera and is purposely going up to it and talking into it like he's doing an Instagram live or something like that. So this is when we check in at the area where Vegapunk's labs had been, and that's where the kids are holed up. At first, they are still asleep, and it's okay. But then they begin to wake up. And eventually, we have a pretty terrible scene of all of them crying and screaming for more candy. And when Usopp attempts to put them out again, like send them back to sleep with his, whatever the I can't remember the pod that he used for it, but he tries to do it again and it doesn't have any effect. Eventually, he does manage to put them to sleep, but what he tried the first time doesn't work a second time. It's as if they are developing an immunity somehow. And I just sort of thought that was interesting, because that can be a thing with drugs. Like, you do something and they develop a tolerance, or the use of the drug makes it so that other drugs don't affect them in predictable ways, But really, we don't spend almost any time with these kids outside of this incident. So, meanwhile, the Marines are trying to get that door open and reporting back to Smoker that he can't, that they're not going to be able to. Smoker is certain that were he in his own body, he'd be able to do it. And I'm not really sure why he thinks that. Like, if you think that, then Tashigi should be able to do it, because this isn't a matter of intelligence, it's a matter of utter brute strength. So, just have her go do it then. Why? I didn't feel like that statement really made any sense. So, then we go to Law, who he is like coming out of one of those little tunnels, and it's almost like he teleported. Chopper is, like, did we teleport? And he just tells him to shut up. I was like, can you be a little bit nicer, please, to my choppy guy? Thank you. Law is saying that I need to find a way to get this place emptied out so that I can look around, and you are going to have to see what you can figure out about the drug. And Chopper is like, you're acting like it's going to be really difficult for you to do. And the master already trusts you. I don't understand why you can't just, like, go up to him and capture him instantly. And then we could go around and find the drug, and it would be, well, like, done deal. And Law says, I can't take him down myself. There are certain circumstances preventing that, which is why I have involved you. You don't need to know the specifics. All I'm asking your crew to do is kidnap him. I'll take care of the rest. I just really want to know what that means. Why not? If the guy doesn't really have a body and is all gas, can you not use his powers the same way? Like, I don't know. But anyway, as he is about to go inside, everybody starts shouting and is like, hey, what the fuck is that thing? They think it's a missile. And eventually we see that it is Luffy blown up to giant size with Frankie sort of riding on his shoulders. And behind them is coming Robin, but she doesn't like smash into the ship the way the two boys do. She manages to make herself a pair of those creepy wings with her hand power and like just gracefully lands on the ground. And I was just like, way to show 'em, girl. I find your power unnerving, unsettling, and unpleasant, but I can't deny that it is effective and practical. And what can I feel like that's the best. So, like I said, this is when Luffy just decides to announce to everybody what the fuck the plan is. So, jumping into the next episode, On the Verge of Annihilation. This, y'all, the whole idea here, this is, first of all, announcing what the plan is, but I had forgotten just how much, for the moment, Caesar Clown's minions believe in him and are defending him on a really foundational level of loyalty. So, at one point, Caesar Clown comes out and insults them all by telling them to fucking... He calls them maggots. I'm wondering if that's what he calls them in the translation when it's the sub. For the dub, he calls them maggots. And they all stop and are like, did he just call us maggots? And one of the other guys is like, we have to have misheard him. And they're like, yeah, we definitely misheard him. He would never say that about us. And I was just like, oh, babies. By the end of this grouping of episodes, even though he has said that to them, they're still going hard for him. You know, it hasn't like, they have not turned the corner and understood. But anyway, he's not out here yet. I'm just kind of jumping ahead because all of these centaurs and everything are just making me so sad. But, we have first Robin taking a bunch of guys down with her ability, like wrapping her hands around their throats. And when we go back to Law, he is looking like down on this whole situation and basically is like, all right, well, they're going to have to sort that out by themselves. We are going inside. And he says, do you remember the plan we discussed? And Chopper is like, yep, you're going to come up with a distraction to get Caesar and the bird lady out of the room, and then I'll look for information about the drug. And he's going down this, like, endless sort of hallway. And this lasts for a little bit. Going back outside, there is such a weird battle going on, you guys. I love how, like, perfunctory some of it is. But, Luffy is looking around and he's like, all right, guys, well, what now? Like, we're here. Is the master going to come out? Or do we have to, like, go in there? And they decide that they're going to have to go inside. So Robin is like, all right, well, let's head that way. As they are, like, deciding what to do, Tashigi, in Smoker's body, attacks Luffy. And essentially, what winds up happening here is, like, because this isn't Smoker in his own body, Tashigi isn't up for the challenge. And Luffy gets to the point where he finally is like, look, this isn't fair. You're not at your best right now. I don't want to beat you when you're in this condition. Go get yourself back in your body, and then we will figure something out. and we'll be able to fight then, and it'll be way more fair. And I found it very funny how Tashigi says something about how she doesn't need charity, I think is the way she words it. And I just found that very, like, a funny response. Okay, so jumping over here to, you sound different too, almost like you're a girl or something. And then we have Smoker coming over into Tashigi's body. Don't get your ass kicked by an idiot like him while you're in my body, okay? And once Luffy, like, understands the switch that has been made, he starts cracking up, which I did think was sort of funny considering that he has just been around all of his friends who have been switched into different bodies. And I didn't feel like he found that nearly as amusing, but I guess it's because none of them are as dramatically, like, the most macho of them is Zoro. And Zoro doesn't get switched out with anybody, if I recall correctly. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm wondering if it's just because of the masculinity of Smoker and how, like, intense he is, that it is extra funny. But, yeah. So, let's see. I'm sorry. I'm trying to jump past this point where he tells him, oh, I'm sorry. I got it confused. I was saying, like, he told Tashigi in Smoker's body, you're not your best. But no, he tells Smoker into Shigi's body, like, come find me when you're back in your body. That's what it is. So Frankie, meanwhile, they're still looking at this door that they're trying to open to get into the lab. And he's like, oh, I can handle that, no problem. And he just uses a laser and just basically burns a hole through the metal and makes a big opening. I was like, I feel as if there's probably a way you could have done that where you guys could get in and then close it behind you. But evidently that didn't occur to him, and now everybody is going to be able to come in after them if they so desire. Doesn't matter yet, though, because within these episodes, our group out here doesn't go inside. So the first thing that we get distracted by is one of those big, like, balls of slime landing on the top of the ship and inching its way down. And nobody on the ship knows what this is, understandably, so they begin to try and deal with it in a couple of different ways. So one dude tries to slice into it, another one tries to shoot it, and they both begin to realize that it's getting harder and harder to breathe. So they're putting two and two together. We're, like, basically poking holes in it and letting the gas out. Guys, we have to go get our gas masks. When they said we have to go get our gas masks, I had a moment of, like, oh, the gas masks you just happen to have handy. And then I was like, oh, no, yeah, they do just have them handy because they wore them on the way in. Like, I was so smirky, and then immediately was like, bitch, shut up. You saw that happen. And finally, this other dude is like, I don't know of any creature that isn't afraid of fire, so I'm going to handle it. And he comes at it, and this thing is, like, growing before their eyes because all of these balls are flying toward the ship and landing and then merging together to become one giant creature. And this dude, by the time he steps up and is like, I'll deal with it, he is looking at, like, a mountain of, it's probably 15 or 20 times the size of what his friends were dealing with a second ago. So he's starting to burn it, and everybody is beginning to think, oh, sweet, look, it's beginning to shrink, or it's, like, sort of slumping. It is looking as if it is actually dying and responding. But then there is this flare of light, and the camera pulls out, and the whole ship explodes, which I genuinely did not see coming. I should have. I really should have. If there's one thing that I know about, like, just the safety of living in my own home, is that gases plus flame, often not an awesome combination. And this is just a condensed gas. But didn't see it coming And everybody on the land is just like, what the fuck? And Smoker is truly upset because this was supposed to be the way out. Like, now what? You know, I don't know how they get out of here, if there's another ship they can steal or something. And there's all of these centaurs who are, you know, despite the fact that they are technically on the side of the master, as we have seen, he doesn't give a shit about preserving their lives. So this thing was just as much of a danger to them as it was to his enemies. So they see that this thing is like destroyed, and because they haven't noticed any more of it, they believe that it's taken care of, that even though it sucks those dudes blew themselves up, one, they were our enemies, so thanks for helping us out. And two, now it's like completely, you know, the gas thing, Smiley, was our enemy also. So basically, two of our opponents just handled one another. I mean, it's ideal. And then, as they're talking about this, they notice another ball of it landing behind them. And we begin to see just how much of it there is. And eventually, Caesar Clown explains it can't travel quickly. So when it needs to go somewhere else, this is what it does. And when we go back to like the original Smiley pile, it has created this sort of like hose that shoots out these balls towards the other side of the island. Like, I'm trying to think of a way to describe this. It almost reminds me of like one of those machines that shoots tennis balls for you to like practice your swing, you know? But yeah, it's a very like weird look. And then we get a moment that you guys, I know I talk about Brooke and his voice actor all the time. I'm not sorry. Like, this guy is so good. So he predictably is saying, oh, like, I've never seen anything like it. It's such a shocking sight. My eyes might pop out of my head. But they would, but I haven't got any. But the way he delivers it, guys, is in a moment of like almost, what's the word I want? Bated breath. Like he is trying to speak in such a serious way as this occasion deserves, like almost reverence in his voice. My eyes might pop out of my head. Well, they would, but I haven't got any. Like, it is so fucking funny. I just can't with him, man. He is just, everything is gold. Even when they see the blob, and what his first reaction is, oh, I thought blobs were just like, you know, fantasy creatures, but I've come across them in books I've read, and they always, in those books, melt women's clothing off. And of course, both Sanji and the samurai are like, hey, can I borrow that book though at some point? No big deal. And I did find that actually funny, even though a lot of the times the gross pervness of these characters I just don't have time for. This was one that I actually did think was kind of funny. So everybody is rushing for cover because this thing is just like raining down on them at this point. And then eventually Caesar Clown does come out into the open, and he is already very much counting his chickens before they have hatched. He's perched on the tip of one of the ships. I don't know if it's the one that just blew up, because there's so much of it left. I can't tell if this is like a different ship, you know. He's got a bunch of wrecks around here, so who knows. And yeah, Smoker is like, okay, I fucking thought it was Caesar Clown. There he is. I knew it. And Luffy is let's see. I'm trying to, like, he's yelling up to him as Caesar Clown says, "Welcome to my island. Allow me to present the most brilliant scientist ever." He is feeling himself so much right here. As this stuff is continuing to rain down, he explains about, like, how he doesn't tolerate water very well. That's right. I thought he said that he doesn't, like, move quickly enough, but he doesn't tolerate water, so he has to fling himself over piece by piece. Inconvenient, but effective nonetheless. And I do think that, like, him being weak toward water, I'm curious how that works, because, like, Caesar had him in a tablet form, and then he added a liquid, and it seemed to activate the creature. But if it's weak to water, I'm imagining it as being sort of like, if he gets over diluted, then he doesn't have any effect. Maybe something like that. I don't know. I'm just really, like, curious about how this is going to shake out, because this weakness obviously is going to be something that we utilize eventually. And I'm also trying to consider, like, what are the characters that we've got and what are their powers? Because if we've got somebody who has some sort of water-based power, potentially they could be the one that handles this thing. I can't think of anybody specifically. The best I can do is Frankie, because he is equipped with so much equipment. Oh my God. Did I just say he's equipped with so much equipment? Ugh, I'm so sorry. But what I'm saying is Frankie doesn't have a particular power set. He has the ability to, like, temporarily make anything his power set. So if he's got some water guns in there or something, perhaps that's gonna do a thing. I don't feel like whatever he has in his arsenal, though, is gonna be big enough. This thing is so huge. So anyway, Caesar Clown continues with his fucking monologuing. This dude, I cannot get enough of him looking directly into the camera and laughing, and then the camera zeroing in on his crazy yellow eyes. This dude is so, like, he's so cartoonish, and I recognize the irony here, but that he has crossed over into being actually fun again instead of irritating. And he's, like, standing there laughing when Luffy just, like, appears in front of him, having wrapped his arms around Caesar's waist, and he clasps him and says, "I got you now, master." And Caesar Clown starts screaming. And I had a moment of just like, wait, you've got him now. He's made of gas. What do you mean? Like, how do you even... And come to find out that because Luffy is using Haki, he's able to lock him into place and keep him from being able to be insubstantial anymore. Now, that is not the same thing as keeping him from transforming. He can still transform, and it's in a way that he can fight back against Luffy with his abilities. But it isn't actually, like, enough for him to just liquefy in his arms and get away. And that is a very fine distinction. And being able to use Haki for this. Interesting. Let's see. We jump back over to our boys with Nami and after an asterisk. And Sanji is saying to himself, "This is even colder than it looks. I better make it quick." And he's, like, in Nami's body with, like, this little fucking bikini top on. And I was just like, my guy, you would be dead. You would so instantly be dead. My God. Meanwhile, on the shoreline, his friends are watching these, like, balls of slime inch ever closer to them. So we go inside, and we have Law going into a room where Monet is all alone. And he's like, "Hey, so where's Caesar Clown?" And she says he's probably outside watching the fight. She says the degenerate can't get enough of destruction. And I thought that was interesting because, like, it makes some sense why she's ignoring him in his monologuing if she really sees him as a degenerate. Like, just not worth her time, her respect. He's doing some admirable stuff, asterisk, with tech and inventions or whatever. So anyway, Law tells her, I'm going to be taking off soon because I have seen enough and I have had enough of this place. I'm going to get out. But I could use your help with something. Could I borrow you for a sec? And she's like, ooh, what is this? A date? So she has these glasses, and I keep waiting for these glasses to, like, matter in some way. They have those, like, spirals on them that a lot of times are sort of shortcuts for these can be used to hypnotize people, you know? And so when she sits up after he asks for her help and the light catches them, I thought for a moment that this was like narrative hint that this was going to be really important and that she was going to use these glasses on him as a weapon, that we were getting a little bit of foreshadowing, you know? And then she just immediately takes them off. And I'm like, maybe they're in her pocket. I thought I saw her leave them on the table, though. So, yeah, she's just, I guess, they're just a fashion choice. And they're not actually able to do anything. But I don't know. I may be wrong with that. I don't know. So, let's see. Okay, we go back outside. Luffy is still holding on to the master. Everybody else is just beating the shit out of all of those around them. And Frankie is impressed. He's like, oh, he can't use his powers. Nice. And then this is when Robin explains to him, like, he can touch him, but he can't stop him from transforming. So it's not exactly a complete victory at this point. And so this moment where we had seen Caesar looking very upset at the fact that Luffy had grabbed him, we kind of transition and see, oh, he was just startled. It wasn't exactly that he was reacting like, oh, my plans are completely foiled. He had just been taken off guard for a moment, and now he's going to get down to fucking business again. And he tells Luffy, don't get cocky. So Luffy tries to use his Gum Gum Bell power with his, like, head to basically headbutt him. But there is a, like, as he's holding, this is so weird, but as he's holding Caesar Clown in place, Caesar Clown uses Gas Cloak. And I'm not entirely sure how this worked, if Luffy just got out of the line of fire. You know, he's snapping his fingers and it goes towards the wrong guy. Eventually it wraps around Luffy. But at first I was sort of like, wait, how? And I guess that the aim isn't as precise as I would think. So Luffy gets completely wrapped up in this gas, and understandably, really, Caesar Clown is like, oh, now this gas is around you. That's it. That's a wrap for you. So you may as well just breathe it in and die and get it over with and stop wasting all of our time. So Luffy finally, after holding his breath, it refuses to let go of the guy. Like, that's not an option. So he begins to inhale, and you see all of it, like, going up his nostrils to the point that the cloud around him is completely gone. And he pauses there. There's a little bit of blood, as if, like, a nosebleed or something, but it's not actually coming, you know, it's just the blood around his head. And then all of a sudden, his earmuffs that he's wearing pop off, and all of the steam comes out of his ears. Like he somehow inhaled it and then shot it back out again. And he says that he doesn't think that this poison has much of an effect on him after dealing with Magellan. Because, as we know, he did create a kind of threshold where he can be immune to it. Well, the master doesn't really like that suggestion. He seems really pissed off at comparing the two of them. He's like, my poison's a lot more powerful than his. And I was like, sir, it's clearly not. He just survived it. So why do you even think that? I didn't realize that he had a whole different poison that was up his sleeve. So this is the point where everybody is like, oh, don't you lay a finger on him. Everybody attack. And then Caesar Clown says, mind your own business, you maggots. And I genuinely couldn't help but laugh because, like, you didn't have to do all that. You could have just told them, I'm handling him, you know. You don't have to. But he, I think, is just so angry at the fact that he's being put through his paces at all that he isn't thinking about what he's saying. And I mean, also the fact that, like, they're here to help you. They're talking about how they're going to step up and defend you. And this is the moment that you decide to let it slip that you don't give a shit about them. Just, yeah, not his greatest moment of judgment. That's all I'm saying. So he's starting to get irate. And he tells Luffy that he's going to put him in his place. He shows him these two discs he's holding. Red and blue ones. And Luffy uses this armament power and heads toward him. And then it turns out that they're a compact. They aren't a disc. Like, when he was holding, they almost look like two giant checkers or something. But when Luffy is coming at him, he opens it and then he says, cast a net. And when he clips it closed, there's this huge explosion. Really what we're getting here is like several instances of him thinking that he has managed to completely vaporize Luffy and being proven wrong over and over. Now, at first, after the explosion, we see Luffy sinking to the ground with like black smoke pouring out of his mouth. It doesn't look great for him. You know, like, I understand why he thought that this had succeeded. However, once again, Luffy is okay. Also, these like smileys that are falling to the deck of the ship around him. Well, no, because he's on the shore now, I think. He had been on the ship. But he's standing on the ship still, because Luffy fell, and he fell on like the deck. So he is standing on the ship still, but he is directing the smileys that are on the ground around the centaurs. That's what it is. And he says, go and give Straw Hat a hug. And they all leap up and like wrap around Luffy. And I appreciated that one of his own henchmen is just like, wait, what? The slime follows orders now? Because, yeah, also was a little confused by this. I was like, I know that this thing has two eyes, but it still didn't really feel like a complete sentient thing. It felt like it's basically been what's the word when you give something, like, you assign it a sort of personality despite it not having one. You know what I'm talking about? Anthropomorphized, I guess. No, that's when you actually make something into like a person. I don't know. I'm not sure the word I'm looking for here, guys, but I had sort of thought that Caesar Clown was treating it like it was a pet just because he found it amusing and not because it could actually do things of its own. So when it listens to his orders, I was like, okay, what? This changes everything, because there are so many of these drops in the air that he could basically wrap everybody in this shit, you know? And he hasn't thought to do that. I don't know if it's just too much trouble or what. But anyway, Luffy's wrapped up in this, and he uses Castanet again. And when I say that he wraps Luffy up again, I have already mentioned that Luffy is fine. This is the second time he does it, and Luffy hasn't come back to consciousness between. So I jumped ahead a little bit in saying that Luffy winds up fine. I forgot that he does it a whole second time. But that was basically him doing, in case this motherfucker still isn't dead, I'm going to hedge my bets and I'm going to do it one more time, which I respect, actually. There's a reason that double tap rule in Zombieland is a thing. You just don't take it for granted that somebody is dead. And you gotta make sure that job is done. Now, granted, he's still wrong, and Luffy is still okay. But I think, at least, that he did his due diligence on this. You guys, I was just listening to a Snapped episode. I'm so sorry. I don't try and joke about this because, somebody literally dies for these episodes to exist. So I don't want to make a joke out of someone's death. But there are times where it's not the person who died, it's the fucking murderer that's the joke. And that's most of them, to be honest. And in one that I was just recently listening to, this woman decided to kill her own mother, and she shot her and then assumed that she had, that the woman was dead and left. And came back hours later to find her mother, trying to give herself some kind of medical care. And the mother hadn't called 911. I don't know if she didn't realize who shot her because she was asleep, or if she knew it was her daughter and didn't want to call the cops on her own daughter, or what. But the daughter comes back and finds her mother trying to, give herself some first aid and shoots her again. So they find this weird crime scene when they eventually come with two wounds that don't seem to have happened at the same time. And this woman evidently walking on her own power to another room. It just, the whole thing looked so weird. And, so what I'm saying is that person, if they were going to be a more competent murderer, would have done a double tap. But I could see how that's particularly difficult to do on your mother. It's easy to do a double tap on a zombie. But when it's your mom, I'm sure just pulling the trigger that one time was probably really hard. So anyway, I am off on a tangent as usual. But this, when Luffy is still apparently destroyed by the Castanet attack, the second one, all of the Master's men are gathered around him cheering for him. And just yelling Master, Master, Master. And he's saying, yes, praise me more. And it was really giving Buggy the Clown. And he's in the middle of just soaking it in when Luffy appears and just says, wow, that was close, huh? And he's just still fine, grinning like a motherfucker. So he goes, all right, basically, I've had about enough of this. And he decides to go into, I think is this Gear 2? Gum Gum Jet Stamp. He does that thing where he turns red and begins to steam. So I feel like that was two. I may be wrong about that, though. Maybe Gear 2 is biting his thumb, and Gear 3 is when he turns into a rubber, a hot water bottle. That's the word I'm looking for. So he's almost... Oops. Sorry, guys. I got a phone call in the middle of that. I hate that. He's almost managed to capture this guy. And is sort of what do I do with him even? Should I put him in something? And they're thinking maybe to find a barrel. And all I could think about was what is going on with Wet Hair Caribou. What we still don't, I don't feel like we know exactly what went down with him, guys. Correct me if I'm wrong. But that instantly made me think of him, and I was like, are we going to do another dude that just has to be kept in a barrel to manage him? If you do, I think you're going to need to handle it better than you did last time, because he evidently just got away and nobody fucking noticed. I could understand that, though. You put him in a barrel, out of sight, out of mind, as they say. Anyway, this is the point where Luffy is himself a little overconfident. And all of a sudden, he begins to gasp and choke. And like I said, it's pretty drawn out, but we have all, like, his friends who are here as well, gasping, choking, and passing out. Meanwhile, Caesar Clown is just, like, cackling and saying, you really fucking underestimated me. You thought the other thing was the best I could do. All right, fine. I'll pull out all the stops. I was hoping that Frankie, because he is I keep wanting to say android, but it's not, because he's part human, cyborg. I was thinking that maybe he might have a better means of dealing with the gas and potentially have some sort of protection for his face, or that his lungs don't function the way other people's do. But no, he gets into it and he starts choking as well and goes down. So does Smoker, with Tashigi in Smoker's body. And I can't remember if Smoker in Tashigi's body goes down. I'm trying to watch this now. I feel like he's outside of the sphere of influence, so to speak. And so he winds up okay and able to get away. But I'm trying to see... Oh, wait, no. Eventually he does get got. It's funny that this would bother him when he smokes so many cigars. It would be sort of amusing if we did a sort of like, well, because he smokes so many cigars, he's already developed a tolerance to toxic gases. I wouldn't even be mad about it. So yeah, Caesar Clown picks him up by his hand and is just sort of dangling him and smirking down at him. And he's looking up at Caesar Clown and he's like, I really thought he was going to pull something out all of a sudden. The way that he's looking at him, I was sort of like, well, absolutely everybody can't go fucking dead, right? But then we go over to Law, and he is in a tunnel, and he puts a hand to his chest. And I'll tell you what, guys, it took me so long to realize that it was supposed to be that the gas was reaching here as well. I really thought, and maybe I'm wrong, because there's a person that kind of comes out of the dark and maybe they're doing something to him. But I started to think that it was the gas that had actually penetrated all the way inside. And he's yelling out, like, who's there? Monet says, oh dear, it seems you're in pain. But I can't tell if she's just being a little bitch, or if she really is enjoying this, or if this was like something intentional on her part. I really couldn't tell. And then finally we see some feet, and somebody comes walking out of the dark and says, it's me. And we don't know who this is. His name has been revealed by the subtitles to be Virgo, Vergo. But don't recognize that name myself. And Law says, why are you here? Why now? And Virgo, like, Monet is, like, giggling. So maybe she is enjoying this? Is she in league with Virgo? But he says, how many years has it been? Look at you, all grown up. And then it just goes to be continued. So, because I had a moment where the voice made me think of, I can't remember if it was Aokiji, I think. It sounded like him, but evidently not. So, and I guess maybe this is why Monet was willing to tolerate Caesar Clown, was she was working with somebody actually competent, and so she just ignored his ass. I don't know. All right, folks, I've got to wrap up, but thank you again so much for listening. Appreciate you all so much. Thank you, Bernadette, for commissioning this episode. And until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
Unspoiled Network podcast.